Welcome to today's deep dive, where we'll be exploring the fascinating world of the neuroscience of friendship and connection. We've got a really interesting mix of science and wisdom to uncover today, and it all stems from a conversation between neuroscientist Andrew Huberman and podcast host Jay Shetty.
Yeah, and what I found so interesting about their conversation is how they connect ancient wisdom with cutting-edge science. It's all about, how our brains are wired for safety and acceptance and, how to thrive in today's crazy world. Like, we'll uncover how something as simple as a good morning text message is actually tied to our primal need for predictability. And get this, we'll even touch upon how challenging ourselves can actually boost our brain power and even help us live longer.
Wow. That's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
I mean, it is pretty amazing how much our modern lives still reflect these basic needs, right? Like Huberman really hits the ground running by explaining how our brains are wired to crave predictability. He says it's a survival mechanism, from back when our ancestors relied on their tribe for safety.
Right, and today that need translates into how our brains conserve energy.
Okay, so how does that work?
Well, think about it. When your brain can accurately predict what's coming next, it doesn't have to be on high alert, constantly scanning for threats. And that frees up so much mental energy for things like creativity and connection and even planning for the future. It's like switching from survival mode to thriving mode.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mm.
But how does that actually play out in our everyday lives? What's the connection between, say, sending a good morning text and feeling safe?
Well, Huberman uses this example of a good morning text as like a mini ritual that reinforces predictability. It's almost like a little check-in with your tribe, It signals, hey, I'm here, you're there, we're good.
I like that. We're good.
And it goes even deeper than that. There's actually fascinating research on facial recognition that shows that our brains are wired to seek out familiar faces, especially when we wake up.
So it's like giving your brain a sense of, okay, everything is as it should be. I'm surrounded by my people, even if it's just through a text message.
Exactly. And that feeling of safety allows us to shift our mental energy to more complex tasks and emotions, It allows us to open up to connection and creativity and all the good stuff that comes with feeling secure.
I love that. Now, this brings up a question for you, dear listener. What are some small, consistent actions that you could incorporate into your routine to create that sense of safety and connection in your relationships? And it doesn't have to be a text message. It could be a phone call or a shared evening ritual or anything that creates that sense of we're in this together.
That is a fantastic question. And while you're pondering that, let's move on to another really intriguing point that Jay Shetty brings up. He challenges the traditional best friend hierarchy and instead advocates for a broader, more diverse approach to connection.
Oh, I love this idea. It really resonates with me because in my own life, I found that, different friendships fulfill different needs. It's like having a diverse ecosystem of support.
Absolutely. Think of it like a toolbox filled with different tools. You wouldn't use a hammer for every job, right? Similarly, different friends bring different strengths and qualities to the table. Some might be great for, deep conversations, others might be great for lighthearted fun, and others are there to support you during challenging times.
So it's not about replacing your close friends, but expanding your circle to include a variety of connections that nourish different parts of you.
Exactly. And this raises another really important question for our listener. What types of connections might be missing in your life right now? What needs are going unmet? Maybe you crave more intellectual stimulation or shared adventures or just someone who shares your passion for, bird watching.
It's about being intentional about the types of connections you're cultivating and recognizing that each one contributes to a richer, more fulfilling social life. And speaking of fulfilling, this next topic might seem a little counterintuitive, is the idea that embracing discomfort can actually enhance our sense of well-being.
Yeah, this is where Huberman's discussion of protocols comes in. These are intentional practices like cold plunges or consistent meal times, or even just tackling that one daunting task that you've been avoiding. They're all about introducing a healthy dose of challenge into our lives.
I've tried incorporating some of these protocols myself, and I have to say it's been a game changer. There's just something about pushing past those initial feelings of resistance that makes you feel more in control and surprisingly more alive.
And there's a scientific reason for that. These practices strengthen a specific part of the brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, which is linked to willpower and tenacity. It's so fascinating how by leaning into discomfort, we're essentially rewiring our brains to become more resilient.
It's like building mental muscle.
Exactly.
And what's even more remarkable is that studies have shown that people who embrace challenges tend to have a larger anterior mid-cingulate cortex. So it's not just about willpower. It's about actually changing the physical structure of your brain.
That's exactly right. So let's shift the focus back to you, the listener. What's one area in your life where embracing discomfort could lead to growth or a greater sense of well-being for you? It could be anything from starting a new exercise routine to, learning a new skill or even having that difficult conversation that you've been putting off.
Yeah, sometimes the things that we resist the most are the very things that can unlock our greatest potential.
That's a profound insight. And speaking of challenges, let's dive into one that's particularly relevant in today's world, navigating the emotional landscape of social media.
This is where Shetty's analogy of social media as a public evacuation of emotion really hits home. It's just so easy to get swept up in the negativity and the drama and the constant barrage of opinions.
It's like we're constantly bombarded with other people's emotional baggage. And while it's important to have empathy for those who are struggling, we also need to protect our own mental and emotional well-being.
So what are some strategies that we can use to navigate this online emotional minefield?
Well, one of the most effective things you can do is be mindful of your exposure to negativity, especially first thing in the morning. Start your day with something positive and uplifting.
I've started doing that myself, and it's made a huge difference. I used to scroll through social media first thing in the morning, and it often left me feeling anxious and overwhelmed. Now I intentionally start my day with something that brings me joy and inspiration.
That's fantastic. It's also really important to be selective about the accounts that you follow. Choose to follow people and organizations that inspire you and educate you and align with your values. Remember, you have the power to curate your online experience.
And let's not forget that online interactions can only go so deep. It's important to balance our online time with real-life connections, because nothing can replace the energy and intimacy of face-to-face interaction.
That's so true. And that brings us to one of the most profound parts of this conversation, the power of surrender and trust.
It might seem counterintuitive, especially in our culture of, control and achievement. But they talk about the incredible peace that comes from letting go of control and trusting in a larger force, whether it's a higher power or just the natural flow of life.
It's about recognizing that we don't have to have all the answers or control all the outcomes.
Yeah.
There's immense freedom in surrendering to something bigger than ourselves.
So I'll leave you with this question to ponder as we wrap up part 1 of our deep dive. What aspect of your life could benefit from releasing control and trusting in the flow? It could be a work project or a relationship or even your overall plan for the future.
Sometimes the most courageous and empowering thing we can do is to surrender to what is and trust that everything is unfolding as it should. We'll pick up on this idea and explore more strategies for cultivating connection in part 2. Welcome back to our deep dive into connection and the brain. In part 1, we explored that powerful need for safety and predictability.
Right, like our brains just crave it.
Yeah, and now we're going to shift gears a bit and focus on how we can cultivate deeper connections in a world that is just overflowing with distractions.
Yeah, it really is. It's like we're constantly bombarded with, information and notifications and just demands on our attention.
It's true. So how do we cut through all that noise and actually create space for genuine connection?
That is the question, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's something that both Huberman and Shetty actually address. Huberman introduces this really interesting idea of attentional episodes.
Attentional episodes.
Yeah, basically these are dedicated periods of time where you're consciously focusing on one person or one activity and really trying to minimize distractions.
So it's like creating those pockets of sacred space where you can truly be present with someone or something, without the constant pull of your phone or emails or that never-ending to-do list.
Exactly. It's like building a mental sanctuary where connection can actually flourish. And here's the key. Those attentional episodes don't have to be long. Even short bursts of focused attention can have a really big impact.
Yeah, I've noticed that even just like 5 minutes of truly focused playtime with my dog makes a huge difference in our bond. Like all the stress of the day just melts away and we're both fully present with each other.
That's a perfect example. And what's really fascinating is that creating these attentional episodes not only benefits your relationships, but it also has a positive impact on your brain. When you train your attention, you strengthen your ability to focus and regulate your emotions and even improve your memory.
So it's a win-win for everyone involved.
Exactly.
Now, how can our listeners create more of these attentional episodes in their own lives? Any practical tips?
Of course. It all starts with awareness. Begin by just noticing where your attention goes throughout the day. Are you constantly checking your phone? Are you multitasking during conversations? Is your mind wandering during
Oh,
meals?
yeah, all the time.
Once you're aware of your attentional habits, you can start to make small changes.
Like putting my phone away during dinner or turning off the TV while I'm talking to my partner.
Exactly. Or it could be as simple as taking a few deep breaths before you engage in a conversation, or, setting a timer for 20 minutes of uninterrupted work, or even consciously choosing to make eye contact and truly listen when someone is speaking to you.
It's about making that conscious choice to be present, right?
Exactly. Now, building on this idea of presence, Shetty also emphasizes the importance of empathy and compassion, especially in our online interactions.
Mm.
It's so easy to get caught up in all the negativity and the drama, but how can we approach these interactions with a different mindset?
That's a good point.
Well, remembering Shetty's analogy of social media as a public evacuation of emotion is a good starting point.
Yeah.
Instead of judging or dismissing people who are expressing pain or frustration online, try to see them with compassion and understanding.
It's about remembering that there's a human being behind every screen name, and that
Exactly.
person might be going through something that we know nothing about.
Right. So the next time you come across a negative or triggering post, challenge yourself to pause before reacting and ask yourself, what might this person be going through? What might have led them to express themselves this way? This simple shift in perspective can have a really powerful ripple effect.
It's like choosing to respond with curiosity rather than judgment.
Exactly.
That actually reminds me of a quote by Thich Nhat Hanh. He says, "When another person makes you suffer, it is because he suffers deeply within himself, and his suffering is spilling over. He does not need punishment. He needs help. That's the message he is sending."
That's a beautiful quote. And it speaks to the interconnected nature of our experiences. Another important point that both Huberman and Shetty touch on is that our nervous systems are not really designed to handle the constant barrage of information and stimulation that we face today.
That's so true. Our brains evolved in a much simpler environment. We're just not wired to process, the endless stream of news and notifications and social media updates that we're exposed to now.
It's true. And it can lead to, chronic stress and anxiety and even burnout.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So what can we do about it? Well, Huberman and Shetty both advocate for creating space for stillness and reflection.
So things like meditation or spending time in nature or
Yeah.
just disconnecting from technology for a while.
Exactly. It's about giving your nervous system a chance to rest and reset and recharge. And here's the amazing part. Creating space for stillness not only benefits you individually, but it also enhances your capacity for connection.
I've definitely noticed that when I'm feeling grounded and centered, I'm more patient and compassionate and present with the people around me.
Exactly. It's like clearing out the mental clutter to make room for genuine connection. So, how much space do you create for stillness and reflection in your own life?
That's a really good question to reflect on. And I think it's a perfect time for us to move on to the next part of our conversation, where we're going to delve into the transformative power of vulnerability and authenticity.
That's where the real magic happens.
Yeah, it is. We'll be back soon to explore how embracing our true selves, imperfections, and all can unlock the deepest and most fulfilling connections. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the neuroscience of connection. We've explored so many fascinating insights from Andrew Huberman and Jay Shetty's conversation over the last 2 parts.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground, from the brain's need for safety and predictability to, the power of small actions and the importance of embracing discomfort and the benefits of stillness and reflection.
So much good stuff.
Yeah, so let's bring it all together. What does this all mean for you, the listener, and how can you apply this knowledge to create deeper, more fulfilling connections in your own life?
That's what we're all here for, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Well, one of the key takeaways for me is that connection isn't something that just happens passively. It's something we actively cultivate through our intentions and our actions and even our mindset.
It's like we're all gardeners tending to our own unique social ecosystems.
That's a great way to put it. And just like a garden needs tending, our relationships need nurturing and attention. So where do we start? Well, one of the most powerful things you can do is to incorporate those small, consistent actions that signal safety and predictability. And not just to your own brain, but to the people you care about as well.
Like those good morning texts we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
It's amazing how such a simple gesture can have such a profound impact.
Absolutely. And remember, it doesn't have to be a text. It could be any ritual that creates that sense of routine and connection, like a weekly phone call or a shared hobby, or even just making a point to, greet your neighbor with a smile each morning. It's about finding those little ways to weave connection into the fabric of your daily life.
And I think that's such an important point. It's about consistency. It's not about, grand gestures, but about those small everyday actions that over time create a foundation of trust and connection.
Exactly. It's like building a bridge brick by brick. Each small action strengthens the connection. And speaking of building, remember that concept of embracing discomfort as a pathway to growth. Those protocols that Huberman talks about.
Yes. It's amazing how pushing ourselves outside our comfort zones can actually make us feel more empowered and resilient.
It's not just a feeling. Remember, those challenges actually strengthen the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, the part of the brain responsible for willpower and tenacity.
So we're not just building mental resilience, we're literally changing the physical structure of our brains.
That's right.
It's like we're upgrading our mental hardware.
I love that analogy. So I really encourage you to identify one area in your life where you can push past your comfort zone this week. Doesn't have to be a huge leap. Start small and build from there.
Small steps lead to big changes, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, as we navigate this journey of deeper connection, it's so important to remember the importance of empathy and compassion, especially in a world that can often feel divided and polarized.
Yeah, you can't.
Shetty's analogy of social media as a public evacuation of emotion is such a powerful reminder that we're all dealing with our own struggles, and sometimes those struggles manifest in ways that we don't understand.
For sure.
So the next time you encounter negativity or conflict, online or offline, try to approach it with curiosity rather than judgment. Ask yourself, what might this person be going through? What might have led them to express themselves this way?
It's like that saying, hurt people hurt people.
Right. You don't have to condone their behavior, but you can try to understand where it's coming from.
I think that's such a powerful shift in perspective.
Yeah.
And it leads to more compassion for everyone involved, including ourselves.
Absolutely. And speaking of self-compassion, I think it's important to highlight one of the most profound insights from this entire conversation. It's the idea that true safety and acceptance ultimately come from within.
It's so true. We often look to external sources like, relationships or achievements or possessions to fulfill those needs.
Right.
But lasting safety and acceptance actually come from cultivating a deep sense of self-love and self-compassion.
Exactly. It's about recognizing our own inherent worthiness, regardless of our achievements or our flaws or the opinions of others. It's about accepting ourselves fully, imperfections and all.
I love that. Imperfections and all.
And treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer to a loved one. Remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. Taking care of yourself is not selfish. It's essential.
Yeah, when you fill your own cup, you have more to give to others.
Yeah.
And that's what I love so much about connection. It's this reciprocal process. When we create a space of safety and acceptance and love for ourselves, we naturally extend that same energy to others.
And as we connect with others authentically, we create a ripple effect of positivity and kindness that spreads throughout the world.
So go out there and be the change you want to see. Cultivate those deep, meaningful connections. Embrace vulnerability. Practice empathy. And above all, remember to love and accept yourself just as you are.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the neuroscience of connection. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep diving deeper.